Rev up your engines!
Steve Chance says, so who's bankrolling Scotty? Some of his explanation videos are way too professional. Nobody's bankrolling me. I'm doing the whole show here. Now, yeah, I get graphic guys to do graphics. I am not a graphic artist by any stretch of the imagination. If I was doing it, there'd be stick people, and they wouldn't look too good either. I couldn't draw to save my life. My wife is a great artist. She can draw all kinds of stuff. But me, I could barely write my own name because I grew up in the beginning of the computer revolution. So I could type really well, and then, of course, it adds on to the computers. But, of course, today, I got a Google Pixel. I can talk to it, and it types really good just talking. You don't need to learn how to type. You just need to get a Google Pixel talking to that. Computers are doing all kinds of things that we used to do manually, and I love it because if you go back 8-10 years ago, I was getting carpal tunnel syndrome from answering people's questions. You know, I got a keyboard here. There's part of the keyboard. I'd be typing all over the place with it, and it wears out your wrist. Now I just talk into the Pixel, and the software for Google, it's pretty good. Especially if, like where I am, where we got fiber optic cables. Most places I go here also, we have a really good 5G. I got good 5G in Rhode Island, so the translation works pretty good there. Damian Pissor says, Scotty, what's your thoughts on a Range Rover Velar? Boy, let me tell you, the one main thing about Range Rovers, their electrical systems stink. Their computer systems stink. When I was a kid, I always had British motorcycles, and I worked on a lot of British sports cars, right? And Lucas was a company that did a lot of the electronics. And Lucas was known as the Prince of Darkness. Batteries would go dead, and the alternators would die, and then your headlights would go dim, and you'd be in the dark at night if you drove a British sports car or a British motorcycle. So, yeah, Gruff said, what are your thoughts on the PT Cruiser? Interesting looking vehicle, right? I mean, they really were interesting looking. But realize they're all made, I believe, in Pueblo, Mexico. Their quality was crap. Their engines blew head gaskets. Their transmissions burned out. They were rolling piles of garbage, but they looked cool, and they sold an awful lot of them. It was like retro 30s gangster look, you know? I mean, they were cool looking vehicles, but unfortunately, they were made by Chrysler, and they were built in Mexico, which are like two of the worst things you could possibly come up with. The only thing that could have been worse is if Fiat would have helped build them, but that was before Fiat bought Chrysler, so at least Fiat wasn't involved in it, or they would have been even worse than they were when Chrysler was making them in Mexico. And Ricardo says, Scotty, how can I see if my transmission is hot or overheating? I don't have a gauge for it. You can get an infrared heat gun, the laser guided ones, right? Decades ago, I had one. It was $900. Today, you can go on Amazon for like $19. You can get ones that work perfectly fine. And you can just take the temperature, drive out, stick the temperature on it. And if it's getting too hot, that'll tell you. You could also put a gauge on if you want. I mean, there's all kinds of aftermarket stuff you can get to hook up to take the temperature of it. But a heat gun costs $19. You can take temperature whatever you want with it. They're real handy. They work really well. And they're so dirt cheap now. All the computer stuff has gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Something that used to cost $900 for 19, and it works. Damon says, what's your thoughts on MG midget cars? Well, MG midgets were probably one of the worst MGs ever made. They were poorly made. They were crappy. Of course, the company went bankrupt, and then a Chinese company bought them, and for a short period of time, they built MG sports cars, but they were all made in China, and they were Chinese design. And they started out decent and got a little bit better, but then, you know, the sports car market is not that big anymore. So now, they still make MGs in China, but they're all SUVs. You know, everybody's into SUVs, right? Now, I've never seen them because they don't sell them in the United States yet. They sell them in Europe and China and places. From what I read, they weren't all that bad, but the old MG midgets, they were just cheap little piles of junk. Cute little cars, but man, they were just so cheaply made. The English made a lot of really cheap stuff in the 70s when they stopped making them. They were just terrible, cheap little cars. Kang Account says, what do you think of Cataclean? Okay, Cataclean, for those of you who don't know, is a bottle of catalytic converter cleaner. You pour it in a gas tank, you fill up the car with gas, and you drive it around. And it can clean some of the crud out. If you have an oil burning engine that burns, coolant, whatever, that can burn and stick on the honeycomb parts inside the catalytic converter and won't work right, and then your check engine light will come on. And if you live in one of those nefarious states that does emissions inspecting, you will fail your emissions, you'll have to buy another cat, and they cost a fortune, right? That stuff actually can work. I used to use it in Houston. Customers used to use it. Now, cleaners only work so much. If you've got, you know, inches of crud inside covering a catalytic converter, honeycomb holes, forget it. Nothing's going to fix it. But if yours is marginal and you put that in and drive it, you might find the check engine light will go off and you get the car passed. It is a cleaner and it does work. But of course, cleaners can only go so far. If it's a really neglected car, nothing's going to help it other than putting another cat on it. Ezekiel Aguilar says, what's your opinion on a 2013 Ford Taurus with 60,000 miles? The Taurus rest were okay cars. This only got 60,000 miles. If you can get one at a cheap enough price and a mechanic like me says it's okay, it could be worthwhile. You want to make sure you're not being cheated. Could be wrecked, flooded, stolen. Who knows what the heck's happened to a used car, right? So you got to have a mechanic check it out. Or watch my video how to quickly check out a car for purchase, and you can see that on YouTube and do a bunch of checks yourself first. But if it really has 60,000 miles, then they can prove it with receipts where, look, I got my oil changed here, it was inspected here, and the mileage started at 0 and then went up to 60,000 miles. You know, you're not cheating you. It could be an okay runaround car. Next question. How reliable are smart cars? Well, you might want to watch my video, Why Smart Cars Are Dumb. Originally, they had a little bitty engine, and it was in the back, over the wheels. A bunch of companies were trying to make it. Ended up Mercedes got involved in building stupid things. They were too slow for the American market for 2 reasons. They had a tiny engine, and Americans are lazy. 96% of Americans drive automatic transmissions, so one of those little engines with an automatic was a dog and couldn't get out of its own way. But in Europe, they all had standard transmissions where they were quite zippier. Now, on the other hand, I had a customer in Houston who had an electric smart car. That was fun. Circles in it. It was a phenomenal, fun little car. Had a short range, maybe 90 miles in town. That didn't go all that far, but it was a real zippy, fast little car. And I believe that's all they make now are the electric versions of them. And in a place like Europe, it's great. You can't park anywhere. They don't drive too many miles. It's not that bad of an idea. But even then, they're pretty much overpriced for what you're going to get. You get a little car, and they're not that cheap for what you're getting. I mean, in the United States, they failed because people are like, man, I'd much rather have a Toyota Corolla or a Honda Civic than one of these crappy little smart cars, and of course you'd be right in that. So they failed miserably in the United States. Just Lovey says, got an 03 Lincoln Town Car. The radio works, but there's no signal to any station. What's going on? Well, if you're lucky, your antenna's got unplugged or the line broke somewhere. FM, you need an antenna. If the antenna isn't connected, you won't get any stations. That's just how it works. Pull it out, see if the antenna fell off, or look where the antenna is. You might find the wire cracked or the antenna piece broke off. Usually it means the antenna is not connected or it's broken, but if the antenna's working, and you know, it just means your radio's broken internally and you can't access it anymore, just go buy another radio. You can get radios dirt cheap, and hey, I mean, if that's the original old radio, it's junky anyways. You can get an Android for $100-something bucks. It works perfectly fine. I got a pumpkin Android. Company sent me in the Matrix, and I love it. Life and Sports Talk with Jake. What recommendations would you suggest me doing with my vehicle having 106,000 miles, spark plugs change, normal oil changes every 4,000 miles, had radiator flush, new brakes? Thanks. All right, well, you're doing the right stuff. I would do transmission fluid every 50 or 60,000 miles too. Expensive for a new automatic transmission if you got an automatic. And of course, just inspect all the rubber parts. If they're cracked or leaking, replace them now. The drive belt, the fan belt, if it's cracked, replace it now. Then it won't break and strand you on the road somewhere. You're doing a good job though. Keep maintaining like that. There's no saying how long it'll last, especially if you got a Toyota or a Honda. Scotty, my dad always tells me to buy a van that's 10 years younger. Need a bigger vehicle. What do you suggest? 5 to 6,000 reasonable to get a van? Well, not anymore. The prices have gone sky high. The absolute best van for taking people around is the Toyota Sienna. Both of my sons have them. And my youngest son got one, and my oldest son said, I'm never going to drive a van. Guess what? He's driving a 2022 Toyota Sienna hybrid van now. He realized how convenient it was when you got 3 kids to bring all your stuff and travel around. So you cannot beat the Toyota Sienna van. They are the best. You're going to have a heck of a time finding one for 5 or 6 grand. And age means nothing with the Toyota, only the mileage. Your father says 10 years or less. I've seen 15-year-old Toyota Sienna vans that ran like clocks, and then you might be able to get one for 5 or 6 grand if you really price around. You're better to spend a little more and get a Toyota, because if you get the American vans, they're crap and they fall apart in front of your very eyes. And if you're going to get one for 5 or 6 grand, generally it's a junker ready to fall apart if it's an American van. William says, on an all-wheel drive, does it matter if the front and rear tire tread are the same or the tire stars trying to sell 4 tires instead of 2? Well, actually, if you have an all-wheel drive vehicle, you have to have all 4 tires the same. If you have a 2-wheel drive vehicle, yeah, you could have 2 on the front that are the same and 2 in the back that are the same. But all-wheel drive vehicles, if you want it to run right, you really need them all to be the same size, because most of those are all computer driven, and the computer's going to get confused if one tire in the front's different than one in the back, and it can end up destroying the transmissions or the all-wheel drive transfer case. It's sad but true. That's why I warn people. You want an all-wheel drive vehicle, be prepared. Every time you blow a tire, you got to buy all 4. You can't just buy one. Now, you can drive it, it'll run, but it will be insidiously doing evil damage to the differential, so I wouldn't do anything but change all 4 when they go bad. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, Remember to ring that bell.